Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Nicola Ducharme. Today I want to talk to you about estrogen dominance and hormone balance and hormone regulation. Sorry, turn my phone off, should have thought of that. So what happens with estrogen dominance? What does that actually mean? So when we're talking about estrogen dominance, what we're referring to is having too much estrogen in relation to progesterone. So everybody has estrogen and progesterone in their body as hormones. Women obviously have more than men. And so really this conversation is in the context of female hormones and female health. Men can get estrogen dominance, but for them, it's more in relationship to testosterone. So that's a different conversation. I'll do a video about that because it's got its own specific ways to address that. So today I'm going to be talking about estrogen dominance in women. So estrogen and progesterone are kind of, they're partners, they're buddies, they're different hormones, but they do work a lot together and they do help to balance each other out. And there are different ratios of estrogen to progesterone throughout a woman's menstrual cycle. In the beginning of the cycle, you've got more estrogen building up to trigger ovulation, and then estrogen falls in the second half of the cycle. Progesterone is lower in the first half, but it's higher than throughout the second half because progesterone is designed to, maintain the uterine lining and prepare for pregnancy. So after ovulation, progesterone should be higher than pending whether the pregnancy, a pregnancy occurred from that ovulation. So, and then progesterone falls right before the menstrual period. Now, what happens in some women is that we end up with too much estrogen in relation to the amount of progesterone. And there's two kind of typical or common ways that this can happen. One is something like PCOS that can affect women of any age, and they tend to be dominant in estrogen and in testosterone. But then the other thing is in perimenopause, which is the years leading up to menopause. So sort of throughout the late 40s, women tend to then get into perimenopause. And what happens is the progesterone levels fall gradually. Like throughout our 40s, the progesterone is just sort of gradually going down, 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 whereas estrogen stays where it was, pretty high. And then in menopause, with progesterone sort of low already, then estrogen tanks. And then you get all those sort of low estrogen symptoms of hot flashes and night sweats and mood imbalance and all that kind of stuff. So women in their 40s and early 50s often find themselves in a situation of estrogen dominance because their progesterone is starting to decline, but estrogen is not declining yet. So we can assess this through lab testing. And there are practitioners who only like to do salivary testing for female hormones. And the argument for that is that it measures the free fraction of the hormone, not what's available and bound to other proteins. Whereas blood testing doesn't really differentiate. It just measures the total hormone. Now, having said that, over the years, I've become fine with doing blood testing for female hormones. I used to only do salivary testing, and that's helpful too if you're doing adrenal testing, which we always do through salivary testing. But if you're doing blood work, then it's fine. Oh my God, everything's ringing. My dad's calling me over and over. So basically, you want to assess, you can get lab work to show if you're estrogen dominant or not. So what do you do if you are? Like, how do you deal with that? Well, there's a few different things. I mean, one, from a nutrition standpoint, you want to make sure you're eating lots of cruciferous vegetables. So that's, your broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, bok choy, cabbage, those kinds of things. Those cruciferous vegetables help you to metabolize estrogen well, okay? and break it down into healthier compounds. Because obviously one of the risks of estrogen dominance is estrogen-dependent cancers can be more likely. So eating those cruciferous vegetables. I will say if you have hypothyroidism, you want to be a little bit careful because those same vegetables can block thyroid function, especially when eaten raw. So that's a situation where you may want to be a little bit careful on that. Otherwise, stock up on those cruciferous veggies. And then obviously a diet and lifestyle that's easy on the liver, because your liver has to detoxify all your hormones. And so it's not just the chemicals we take in and the toxins that the liver has to deal with. It's all our own metabolites as well. So be kind to your liver, not too much alcohol, some liver support herbs and things like that can help as well. Now, in terms of like supplements for helping with estrogen dominance, I really like indole 3-carbinol and DIM. Okay, now they're cousins, but they are extracts from cruciferous veggies. And so they are basically the active ingredients that are going to help. And this is probably my number one favorite sort of intervention for estrogen dominance is, getting people on either DIM or indole 3-carbinol. Often we'll use a product that contains both, which is nice. And it's only, 1 capsule, 2 capsules a day. It doesn't add a ton to the regimen, but that can be really helpful in breaking down those estrogens. And what's really nice is it also helps to break them down into healthy metabolites. So some metabolites of estrogen are more cancer causing than others. And so the indole 3-carbinol, the DIM, just helps to push the pathway towards the non-cancer promoting metabolites. So that's an added bonus with that. So obviously, if we have high estrogen, we want to work on kind of cutting that down and helping with metabolism and detoxification. So that's where the liver support, the indole 3, the DIM, they all come in. But if you think about the balance of estrogen and progesterone, the other thing that we can do in that situation is support progesterone production. And there are a couple of different ways to do that. From a herbal standpoint, my favorite would be chaste tree or vitex, it's also called as its Latin name. And chaste tree is a plant that works on the pituitary, which is up in the brain, but it directs a lot of our endpoint hormones and encourages our body to produce more of our own progesterone. So it's kind of nice because it's just gentle. It's just encouraging our body to do more of what it needs to do. It's not necessarily, putting in large amounts of hormones or supplementing with anything synthetic. It's just a plant saying, hey, pituitary, how about a little bit more progesterone? It can take a couple of months to kick in to really sort of start making a difference. So I encourage people, if you're going to do chaste tree, give it a 3-month trial. And my favorite brand of that is actually MediHerb, which is an Australian company, but it is available here in the US, and they make chaste tree tablets. And so that's what I use with my patients, but there are other good forms of chaste tree as well. So you can sort of more subtly enhance progesterone that way. Now, if that's not doing the trick, or for someone who really wants to get a little bit more aggressive, I suppose, for want of a better word, you can also do progesterone supplementation. And how this looks, because I said at the beginning, you've got your monthly cycle, progesterone's low for the first half, then after ovulation, progesterone theoretically should be higher and stay high until the end of the cycle where it drops off for menses. So what often happens then is, the progesterone is lower in that second half. And that's why when we're looking at this, we test on day 18, 19 of the menstrual cycle. So if you're on a 28-day cycle, then about day 18 is good. You could get away with 19 or 20 if you've got a slightly longer cycle, maybe 17, 18 if you've got a slightly shorter cycle. But that's where you want to get those blood readings so you can see where your progesterone is when it's meant to be high and balancing estrogen. You'll see then if it's not high enough to balance estrogen. So you can actually supplement with progesterone itself in the second half of the cycle. Now, I would only support Bioidentical. So there's a couple of different ways you can do progesterone. There are some over-the-counter progesterone creams that are derived from certain plants. The law states that they cannot contain more than 20 milligrams of progesterone, because above that it gets to be a prescription kind of strength. So if you want to just try, a little bit, you can get a progesterone cream, just use it in the second half of your cycle and see if that helps. Moving up from there, if we need stronger doses, like 50 or 100 milligrams, that would need to come through a compounding pharmacy. But it's so worth it to get bioidentical hormones. Synthetic hormone replacement therapy, especially synthetic estrogens, have been found to be very dangerous. Never mind all the ethical considerations about pregnant mare's urine and all that kind of stuff. I'm a horsey person, so that, seeing the conditions the horses are kept in to produce that synthetic estrogen makes me really sad. But the bioidentical is just so much better for your body. And so that's the way I would go. Now, when you go through a compounding pharmacy, you can choose what form you want your progesterone in. So they come in like under the tongue lozenges. You can get them in capsule form. You can get progesterone cream. I love the cream for women who are not having menstrual cycles. So if we're doing hormone replacement therapy for someone who's gone through menopause, then the cream is great. And that's the best way to do the estrogen as well. And because my daughter crawling through the background, then, you can do that and it's great. It works really well. For women who are cycling, my concern with cream is it's sort of harder to get that rapid start and rapid stop to fit in that second half of the cycle. So when you stop progesterone, you want your levels to drop quickly and then your period comes on. A cream could take a little bit longer to wash out of the body. It gets stored in adipose tissue. And so you have less precision with your dosing. The under the tongue lozenges, I think, are a good middle ground. They do have better absorption through the mucous membranes than just swallowing a capsule. But you can start and stop more readily. So that's kind of what I like with women who are cycling. Capsules are another option. However, you will lose some potency through, digestion through the GI system. So you will lose some efficacy with that. The context that I would choose a capsule, however, is for women who are having a lot of trouble sleeping, because it's quick acting and it can really help to put people to sleep. So there are times where I use progesterone capsules, but it's really when we need progesterone and there's a sleep issue. Otherwise, for cycling women, I like the under the tongue. For postmenopausal women, I like the cream. So there's a few different options there. The other thing that I do feel is important when people have estrogen dominance and trying to balance their hormones is to do adaptogens, which really provide a lot of adrenal support. And I've said this before, but I'll just point it out again now. Your adrenals produce 35% of your reproductive hormones, like your estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, prior to menopause, and up to 50% after. Okay, so one of the things to be aware of is you do want to be cautious about DHEA if you're estrogen dominant, because DHEA converts to estrogen and testosterone, not to progesterone. So it goes off in a different part of the pathway. So you don't want to take high doses of DHEA when you're trying to manage high estrogen levels or high testosterone levels. So that's one thing. But a general adaptogen blend, meaning herbs like ashwagandha, holy basil, maca is actually a good adaptogen as well, although it can be a little bit estrogenic, so I'd probably not choose that one in this context. Schizandra, there's so many nice herbs and there's some really nice formulas. I have a great adrenal formula. For those of you that like tinctures, I have a great adrenal formula that helps balance, hormones on every different level. It's even helped people balance their thyroid hormones. So doing adrenal support and those adaptogens just help regulate everything in the body. They're not going to push anything up. They're not going to suppress anything. They're balancing. They're like tonics for the body. So just to summarize then, if I have someone with estrogen dominance who's maybe like 45 and starting to get into that perimenopausal kind of age, my favorite things would be a combination of indole 3-carbinol and DIM. And often I'll just start there and potentially add some liver support like milk thistle, dandelion, glutathione, just to help with the detoxification part and the metabolism part. So that's step one. If we need to go to the next step, it could be chaste tree, just to help regulate the progesterone without getting into the domain of like supplementing actual hormones. From there, the next step could be like over-the-counter progesterone cream. That's just a lower dose, like a 20 milligram dose of progesterone. Or from there, the next kind of tier would be to get a prescription bioidentical progesterone from a compounding pharmacy and do it either as a sublingual or a capsule, depending on that individual need. Right, so these things I have found to be very effective. Don't forget the adrenals, don't forget the adrenal herbs, the adaptogens, just to kind of keep everything in balance. But these things I found to be very, very effective and helpful for women of all ages. I've had 20-year-old women with PCOS who are estrogen dominant, all the way through to perimenopause. And then, like I said, menopause gets into a different ballgame because estrogen tends to drop at that point. So we address that differently. And I'll do a video on another day about hormonal balance and regulation postmenopause, and also the same thing in men, because like I said, men can become estrogen dominant, but usually for them, it's the balance with testosterone that's more of the issue. So that's it for today. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day, and I will see you again really soon.